Okay. So, hi everyone. If you are currently on the webinar or if you are watching the recording later, you may or may not know me. I'm Carley Nuzzo, and I am an ESM counselor. And what we talk to our students a lot about, and what comes up, a lot of questions come up a lot about language, whether it be, do I have to finish these like specific requirements? I don't like the way that they teach it at my school, or I speak this language at home, or I really want to learn a language that's not offered at my school, but I'm afraid that it'll be a waste because I can't show that on my college application or whatnot. So today we have a we're very lucky to have the founder and director of LanguageBird, Dr. Karyn Koven, sorry. She has been a college counselor just like us for many years, and also what is an expert in curriculum building and has had a lot of experience bringing languages in very accessible ways and very individualized ways to many thousands of students. So we are very excited to have her, and
Thank you.
I will let her introduce herself as well.
Thank you so much. Hi, Carly. Thank you. And I hope that we can make this useful and conversational a little bit so that those counselors and students, parents who maybe even watch this on record can get their questions answered and interests answered. I love what you guys do at ESM Prep. I think that it pairs so nicely with what we do at LanguageBird. I, as you mentioned, come from a teaching background as well as a counseling background and a college counseling background. I was a co-founder of a charter school here in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley. And I really focused at that time. I thought it was incredibly important to have a very strong curriculum in order to lead students to be college prepared, as well as I really made it my mission to make sure that students were able to make the bridge to college. Many of them were first generation, so that's a passion of mine, is getting all students to college with ample financial aid. So that was a passion. And like you said, I spent a good amount of time in college counseling, so I know what you do and what families go through on that side and sort of the concerns that they have and anxieties and what do I need to do. So today I'm thrilled that you asked me to talk about language and what we do at LanguageBird and how that contributes to preparing students for college, why they should persist in the language. Like you said, there's many reasons why maybe not to, but I think there's more reasons why you should continue. So a lot of my background really had to do with research and finding out what makes a student a really good college applicant, not just in show, although that's important so that you get into a school that's a good match, but also why you should persist in the language, why you should create sort of a culture within your school or your family or your organization that is college going or college bound. And so I think like we should talk about that a little bit today, and talk about sort of the solution a little bit that I had to this problem that I saw students have. And I have a PowerPoint that will sort of give people a visual if they like that rather than just looking at
it. No, that's great. I really love that you're talking about college preparedness as well. I think that a lot of times something that we get stuck on is, well, I just want to look good to colleges. I want to do what will get me in. And so it's something that also a lot of people don't really understand what colleges are looking for. But also it should be paired with being successful in college as well and having a smooth transition there as well. And I think that a lot of our parents, at least, well, I know a lot of my parents are often concerned with, will my student be able to write at a college level when they get there? Will my student be prepared? And so I love that from at least the language perspective, you have a little bit of you help with that a little bit more than what we're used to, and give more options to students so they do have that preparation. And like you said, the one-on-one model, it's something that we're really passionate about here, and something that we love about LanguageBird too.
Yeah, thank you. I do think that, like I said, we have many similarities in terms of what we do. And I just found that for a variety of reasons, and founded LanguageBird because I saw that my students weren't persisting in language, even though they attended a great school, California Distinguished School, lots of options, lots of attention, small classes. But it just either got sort of shuffled out because other things came in, and it wasn't necessarily a requirement, but it's something that students were missing on their applications that made them better applicants and better prepared for college. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Should I start sharing my screen? Are you good with that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so let me see, because with the yeah, we got it here with the Zoom. Okay, tell me if we're all right.
We're great. Looks good.
All right. All right. Well, thank you again so much for having me. And as we were talking about, LanguageBird and language learning in high school can really help you prepare for college. So language is sort of like any other subject, and people forget about it. Unless you persist, unless you continue, you will have learning loss. So if you stop taking your language, let's say in your sophomore year, and your junior and your senior year, you do not have a language class, if there's a requirement when you get to college, you're going to be placed at a beginning class, because you won't have had those 2 years of study. So you really need to keep it up in order to keep the skill and to be placed properly when you're in college. A lot of students I know would get to college and be really discouraged. Oh, I already took 2 years of Spanish. I can't believe I was put in Spanish 101, and now I have to take X number of years of Spanish for my major. So continuing to study helps you meet the requirements for future degrees, but also meet the requirements for college admissions. It helps you to demonstrate global literacy skills, that you're aware that there is other language and culture outside of where you live and where you go to school, and that's important. Colleges want to see some awareness in that regard. You can explore other interests and possible majors through learning a language, either through travel. Maybe something would interest you like hospitality, even medicine, right? We have a lot of adult learners even coming to us who are nurses, lawyers, doctors, business people, who realize that learning another language is really critical to their business, or to give them an extra skill for jobs in the future. And just the general opportunity for travel, community service when you're in high school often requires another language, whether it's going to South America to help build homes. We have a lot of students that are going to do that, or some sort of community service component, or a fun travel component. You want to be conversant, and you want to be aware of not only the language, but the culture as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And even, internationally, but also domestically now, a lot of languages are super, well, which you were talking about with careers, but also just with community service or anything like that. A second language is really beneficial. And I think I was talking to you, or I know I was talking to you earlier about my daughter is now learning Spanish. And of course, I know Spanish, but I'm rusty. And so I can firsthand speak to, even if you just take a year or two off, it's really hard to not get rusty and to not lose your edge. My conjugations are falling off sometimes. So
yeah, sure, it takes consistent practice, and hearing it as well as speaking it. They're actually two different skills and two different parts of the brain that you use to listen, right, to understand and comprehension, versus the other way, which is speaking skills.
Yeah.
The different parts of the brain. So you have to practice both. And sometimes even in a classroom in high school, you're not given much of an opportunity to speak. So we have a lot of adult learners, a lot of students that come to us in their junior or senior year that all of a sudden are sitting one-to-one, right, face-to-face via video chat, which is a great way to get over sort of anxieties, is to just be one-to-one. You know, there's not a whole classroom that's listening to your, you know, what feels like to you a funny accent, or you're pausing or you're thinking.
Right.
So there isn't that peer pressure, but you're there with an instructor who's a native speaking person who can share their language and culture. So you feel a little bit more comfortable with that and more easy in terms of practicing. And that's the key to really utilize a language. I have some people who have been on my staff with me that have written curricula that have been educated in the US and now maybe are French teachers or Spanish teachers, but admit that while they were in college and while they were in high school, rather, they really thought that they knew French and they got a 5 on the AP French test. But then when they went to study abroad in college and were dropped in Paris, they spoke Alabama French and no Parisians would speak to them, you know? So it's an example of, yes, you can learn certain things through software or in a class where you're listening a lot and repeating, but you really need the live interaction with somebody. Just like think about, you have young children, right? How they learn the language, right? They practice all the time and they say things incorrectly. They try things out. You might correct them or they might hear you say things, right? So there's a lot that goes on in language learning that isn't mirrored in a typical classroom.
Yeah.
So we try to do that in our classes to make, as this slide, just to point out, you know, the social emotional connection is significant. I think when you feel bonded to your teacher, when you understand their culture, you can also understand the language better. And of course, we talked about, you know, the expanded personal and professional options that you have if you can speak fluidly and feel comfortable and confident doing that. And then we also talked about, you know, the universities and colleges, and some do have a requirement. So I'm sure that, you know, when you're counseling students and they're looking at a particular set of schools, especially competitive colleges, top tier colleges, if you will, they're all requiring probably 3 years of a language. And oftentimes, unfortunately, high school counselors might not say to students, oh no, you must take this. They'll either listen to the student or just automatically program students into a program at school which doesn't suit their college going needs. So I know that's where college counselors come in as well to support that and say, whoa, wait a second, no, you need that. And you know, that will give you a leg up when you're trying to get into XYZ college.
Right. And a lot of times those minimum thresholds are not actually what it takes to get into the school. So a lot of times students will look at those A through G requirements for UCs or whatnot and be like, oh, I only need XYZ. And it's like, okay, that's the minimum requirement. That's not what it takes to actually get into the school. So that's something too, where even if the school says you have to have, like we require 2 years, often they do want to see that consistency that you're talking about that you can carry into college. And also not only the consistency as far as the subject, which is, you were talking about both, but also like you were saying, your commitment to that type of learning, your commitment to that like worldview, it's much more nuanced than just, oh, I took, you know, 2 years of language.
You know, we talked about some of these skills because we're doing some conversation, sort of it might be repetitive, but I'll skip also to, I have a slide in here about the 2 years that we're talking about, which is that, you know, there is that higher requirement, but also they really appreciate that you've persisted, that you didn't give it up. But oftentimes it's true, though, I sympathize with students because sometimes there are other things that they want to take and there are only so many hours in the day.
Right.
And because of all the benefits that we've talked about, the skills that you can get, the college advantages, the reasons why you would connect, right?
Right.
And do this in such a way where you learn through conversation and connecting with an individual. Colleges really see and that they notice that too. The sympathy, like I said, is with high school students because you have so many choices and only so many hours in a day. But what our program does is we enable students to take their courses that are accredited on the evenings, weekends, during breaks, summer. Yeah, so it's like you can make room, and we have a lot of students who are athletes, who are dancers, who are musicians, performers, and a variety of different situations that want to get a language course done over the summer or do it after school and on the weekends. I also think an important part about personal connection and cultural context that I have here is that there are times that students really are authentically not inspired by the offerings at their school. And to be honest, schools are pretty limited, right? It's very rare that schools can offer more than a Spanish or French. If you offer both Spanish and French, that's pretty good. If you throw in another one, that's a really fancy school, right? Oh, your school offers Mandarin or something else. It's
Right.
like, oh, that's really great that you have those choices. But a lot of times there aren't those choices. And so with LanguageBird, I think what I've focused on creating is the opportunity for students to learn or have a choice of 15 world languages. So we have some students who like language is their thing, right? So some students, tennis is their thing. The oboe is their thing. And I know as college counselors, you want to know, you don't have to do 10 things, but you can do 1 or 2 or 3 things really at depth. And so we have some students, the language is their thing, and they're learning Russian and German and Mandarin and Spanish at once. So they're taking lessons. We have students who have a personal connection to a language and therefore are really drawn to it, whether it be Hindi or Greek or Arabic or Hebrew. These are all languages that we offer that sometimes students really have an interest in. And I'm sure you know, Carley, from working with high school age students, that right now, K-pop, Korean culture is so popular. So Korean is super popular to learn right now, and Japanese with all the anime. So these are really like passion subjects for students. And sometimes their parents say, we want to support this. Just like if a student had a real skill or an interest in something in the sports area or arts, let's do something to support this interest. And so they often come to us for that as well.
I think that's awesome. I think the only thing, well, not probably, there's many things we could talk about, but something I also wanted to make sure that we talked about was native speakers who might not have the ability to show that on paper to on their college applications, and or who are really good speakers because they've learned it in their home, but maybe need extra help with writing and reading, which we kind of mentioned the other side of that before, right? Yeah. So in the classroom, you're getting better at the writing and the reading. And that's definitely the case for me, as you were saying that the speaking and the hearing are completely different. We always joke that I'm a really good eavesdropper and I'm a good listener. And then my husband, who grew up surfing and going on surf trips in Mexico and South America, he's the speaker, and I'm the ears, and he's the speaker.
You translate and then he speaks.
Yeah, we really do. And so like together we make one good speaking, one almost fluent person. Yeah. But it's that other side of the coin too, is the students that might have, you also offer really great options for students that maybe have the speaking side down, but need more help with the grammar and the writing and all of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really important too, to not discount or discredit students that speak another language at home or multiple languages at home. Yeah. And I think it's really important to be able to convey that on college applications and future resumes. I know when I get a resume, or in the past when I've done college admissions and looked at applications. I'm really interested by that, and the multicultural sort of aspect of that applicant or the person. And there are a variety of ways that students who are not enrolled in a class at school can demonstrate on a college application that they are indeed proficient in a language. So I'll give an example. Let's say you speak Hebrew at home. And you're fluent in speaking Hebrew. One way that LanguageBird works with some of those students is that if their skills in reading and writing, right, the opposite of what they get in a classroom, as you were saying, are a little bit lower, and a parent says, I want them to have working fluency, meaning that they'd be able to get a job in that language. They can already speak, but I want them to write and read better. We can focus, because it's individualized and custom built curriculum, on getting them to do that. So we can just turn the class into, although we like to focus on the speaking, we know that if somebody is really proficient at that already, we can focus on the reading and writing per, their request. Now, another way that a student can do that, that's more official than just saying on an application, I speak Hebrew at home, is that they can take a high-level course with us. So in language, the interesting thing is it works a little bit like math when it comes to credit, in that a higher level validates a lower level. And so if you're able to take Hebrew 4 or Spanish 4 or 5 because you already speak it at home, it's evidence then that the courses below that, right, have already been surpassed. So if you pass a level 5 Hebrew course, then it will be assumed that you are at that level or above. And we offer very high level courses, so college level and really above, so that they're customized and so that they're tailored to the student. So we have high school courses that are titled Hebrew 5, Hebrew 6, Hebrew 6 plus. So there's a lot of space for a student to grow, even if they're fluent at home. And we also offer the opportunity for students to prepare for an AP test. So we can help them with the preparation for that in a language where the AP is offered. But a sort of better solution to that might be taking the Global Seal of Biliteracy. And that's an exam that we offer. The Global Seal of Biliteracy, you can look it up online. It has its own website. It's not our test, but it's nationally recognized. And anybody over the age of 13 can take a test, and I think they have close to 30 different languages. So it really spans a good number of languages that might be considered otherwise kind of niche languages. But students are able to engage that way and then have a score that they can take with them to college. And that score can be used at some colleges for placement. And they can also have a certificate, either a functional or working fluency, that they can put on LinkedIn and their resumes in the future. There's even a special spot for it on LinkedIn. So if any, students, even adults, anybody over 13 wants to show their speaking abilities and language abilities, they can do that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. And like so going back again to those super high level courses, not just for native home speakers, but also for our students that have already surpassed the offerings of their high school. So, if you take AP Spanish in your sophomore year and you're like, well, my school doesn't offer anything else, so I can't take any more. You can always find LanguageBird and do higher courses to not only be able to continue that going forward, but also to have something that is
we have students do that all the time. Sometimes they were in an immersion school as young children. Other times maybe they started the language in middle school and other students don't. So they're a little bit ahead in high school. And like you said, they surpass. Or they just were placed in a higher level to begin with and just need more, or it just doesn't fit in their schedule. We also have some students come to us that only have the option to take AP. And while AP is a good match for some students, other students think, oh, I'm taking AP math and AP science and AP English. I don't really want to take AP language as well. It's a little too much, or I'm not as interested as being in the play or being, on the volleyball team or whatever it is. And so they don't want to take the higher level AP offering at their school, but they can take Spanish 4 or Spanish 5 with LanguageBird. So it offers just another alternative to what they offer at their school.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have to say, Carly, that one thing people always ask me is, well, there's two kind of things. One is that maybe they learned through a software, a program that was a software, a learning management system, or they're learning on Duolingo. Or they ask about translators, right? Translators are getting so good. I have my phone here, I can talk into my phone and it will translate it for me, right? Is it cheating? I don't know. I think it's helpful, right? In some ways, it's certainly helpful. However, there have been lots of studies and lots of conversations about technology, and artificial intelligence really can't replace that connection. The understanding that there are common phrases, expressions that are really deeply woven into a region, a culture, a tradition of people. So if you really want to interact with the people, if you want to travel, if you want to do business somewhere, you really need to graduate from technology, from an app, from just reading and listening to actually conversing. And the best way to do that is immersion. So it would be ideal if you could go somewhere and live there and homestay with a family. Everybody knows that as soon as you do that, everybody says, that's where I learned to speak right then, because you have to do it. It's like a baby, like a baby coming out learning to speak. It's like, okay, here I am. I got to communicate. So I'm going to figure it out. But language learning is a lot more than just memorizing catchphrases. Not everybody needs to know fruits and vegetables. There's particular value to knowing and learning things that matter to you. We've had students who have learned baseball Spanish, because that really connected to them and we could personalize it. They didn't really understand how they would use Spanish. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, where do you hear Spanish? Oh, my baseball team. People, speak Spanish on my baseball team. Well, let's figure out, how you can speak baseball Spanish to them.
Yeah.
So when you contextualize it, or when you bring culture in, and our teachers also share their culture, their traditions. What is a Russian tea ceremony? Some of our teachers are abroad and might take students to an area of town or to a French cafe where they can order something, in real time. So be immersed essentially by not necessarily going abroad or while preparing to go abroad. So those are really important, I think, skills, and that culture and language are not separate from each other. Just one of my favorite quotes, and a good reason and a synopsis for why take language and learn a language rather than just translate. Nelson Mandela said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. So simply making the effort to understand somebody, to understand their culture, to try to learn their language and to speak it as best as possible, it really goes a long way when you're talking about relationships and relationship building.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's hard. I have a lot of parents that talk to me about the cell phones and everything in general and afraid of kids not making connections in their own languages. So this is just extrapolating that. Like, it's really hard to build relationships with someone who's not speaking the same language as you, even more if you have a phone in between the two of you while you're actually physically talking.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's a good point. The technology can sometimes get in the way of things like eye contact, of being able to see the person fully.
Yeah, those soft skills that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and really, like, the term soft skills, I mean, essentially in our world today, considering how interconnected and how easy it is to travel from place to place typically, except when in a pandemic, but typically, and for the future of the students that you're working with, ESM prep students are students who are going to be making changes in the world. They're going out, they're interested in going to college, they're going to be educated, they're going to get probably high-level jobs that involve them speaking with and interacting with a lot of different people, travel in the future. So it's really key that they understand sort of the meaning of it and why learning a language or learning about somebody's culture is important.
It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had a couple of other things, and then I'll leave it open for any questions.
I know that we have a little hand down at the bottom, but
Cool.
will get to the questions.
Okay. I can't see them because I'm sharing my screen.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll read.
Already talked about LanguageBird and how we support students with accredited classes. And so I mentioned that in our one-to-one curriculum and how it helps students to fill the gaps. So we've been talking about that a little bit, but my passion is really to make students, no matter, how they choose to do it, really interested in persisting in language, interested in travel, interested in other people. Our courses are flexible. And so that appeals to a lot of students who are very busy. They also, I want to mention, Carley, because we were talking a little bit in meetings prior to today about, students early on, right? So some students listening might be early on in the process or early in high school, but what if right now it's October of your senior year? What can you do in this regard? Or if you're already in your junior year and you're not enrolled in a course and you're starting to panic, or maybe your counselor tells you, well, why didn't you take Spanish your junior year? And all of a sudden you're thinking, what do I do? Like we mentioned, after school weekends, summers are possible. And our courses consist of 24 one-hour private lessons with an instructor to complete a full year course. So if you wanted to take Spanish 3AB, 24 lessons, 3 times a week, which is typical, like over a summer, you'd finish a full year course in 8 weeks, which is like summer school at many, schools across the country. So I just wanted to mention, like, the timing of the class, the personalization, the schedule is something that appeals to students, which I know is something that ESM also works well with students on, is matching their time period. I know how busy students are today, families are today. It's also helpful to not have to drive to a class. That you can do it from either school. We have students in labs, computer labs, or areas in school where they can connect. We also have students at home connecting. So really connecting via video chat is a very flexible modality for learning. And you also get the opportunity of meeting people who live all over the world. So about 50% of our teachers are in the US and another 50% are abroad. And I think it's really cool that students can connect with somebody in Mexico City or Argentina or Brazil or Spain or France. We have a German teacher who lives in Mexico. It's just really mind, opening. But just like ESM, we have the one-to-one instruction, flexibility, self-paced, customization, and tailored to each student. And so I just wanted to point out the similarities to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because we have talked about the high achieving students a lot. And so it's also important, I think, to share that for a lot of kids that maybe they don't think language is their thing, but then once they can get with a one-on-one instructor and go at their own pace, maybe it's much easier to learn. Maybe it becomes their thing, maybe it doesn't become their thing, but it's just much easier for them to understand and learn. So I think that, the courses that LanguageBird offers is great for students across the spectrum of needs and levels, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a complimentary, definitely. I saw that there was a question or a comment from Gerald that our biggest challenge is speaking with native speakers. Kids take French in high school, but we aren't French speakers at home. Yeah, it's the practice, and even hearing an accent, you know, and there are different accents too. Sometimes, you know, parents will come to us and say, oh, I want my student to learn Spanish from somebody in Spain or somebody in South America or Mexico. Be particular about that. Portuguese, right? There's a difference between learning from somebody who's in Brazil versus in Portugal. So there's slight, you know, differences, but I think that that's interesting to point out as well.
Yeah, I think too, just the confidence level, coming as someone who learned a language in a school, in a classroom, your confidence with native speakers tends to be much less than if you're just speaking to someone else that you think is like at your level. And so the opportunity to be able to learn from a native speaker and to have that repetition, even the confidence there and being able to practice that is really great too.
Yeah, the one-to-one really facilitates that, because once you feel a little bit comfortable, which usually happens around lesson 2 or 3 with students,
Yeah.
you know, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can trust this person, they're safe, you know, I can make errors, mistakes, you know, we take careful, we pay careful attention to our teachers, the quality of our instructors, that they have experience, that they know how to reach students. You and I were talking about like this online and connecting, and do you turn your camera on or off? And students sometimes are shy about that. Adults are too. You know, we're sort of all just have gotten used to it, more so in the last couple of years where it's become very prevalent and most common. But, you know, having that person who makes you feel at ease, and then it's just one-to-one, makes you feel like you can take more risks, I think.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's really helpful for students learning a language. And I saw that Janet asked a question. We do have students with ADD, ADHD, a variety of learning differences. Really for us, a lot of things that occur in the classroom that prevent students from learning at their best are non-existent in our classrooms. The one-to-one takes care of a lot of those things. Attention issues can be addressed by having sort of shorter sessions, or the teacher allowing the students to take breaks. I've seen students, you know, eating, fidgeting, etc. in our classes, but the teachers really try to keep their attention. We also use project-based learning, so we don't have timed tests. So oftentimes students with accommodations for testing, you know, become sort of irrelevant when we say, hey, you know, do it on your own. Come back to us when you feel like you're ready, and then you can present as many times as you want. You can make revisions to your paper. You know, when you think that you're ready and you're done, then you turn it in, and that's when we'll evaluate it if they're taking a course for a grade or a credit. And, you know, they get nervous because we're providing a transcript, credit with a grade on it. And so they want to do well, and we want them to do well too. So we hold them to a standard. And we use the ACTFL standards, but we allow for them to really demonstrate their learning in a variety of different ways, which is helpful for learners with disabilities or learning differences.
I think for all learners to actually put, instead of just being tested on it and forgetting it, I always say, like, if you're putting what you're learning to use, it's going to stick with you a lot longer, and it's going to be a lot more meaningful, really, in any subject. And so, you know, both of us were previously educators. And so, well, I guess still kind of, but, you know, more formally educators. And that was always something that I tried to put into my curriculum too, was actually having students apply what they're learning. And so I really love that you do that too.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad. And I know that, yeah, it seems like Janet popped off, but she said, I guess she has a student. That's good to know that she has a student in LanguageBird who struggled in the classroom, and she was taking Mandarin 3 and really loves it.
Awesome.
That's really awesome. Thanks, Janet. I'll have to send her an email. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Are
Yeah,
there any other
so
questions?
I don't.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Karyn?
I think we covered a lot of
We covered a lot.
We did. We covered a lot of things in a pretty short amount of time. I'm really happy to answer any questions in the future. I also have LanguageBird admissions counselors here if anybody's interested in answering more questions. We're really happy to direct people to opportunities that fit their needs. So we know that our program might not be the best fit for everybody, but if you do have a question on language learning, the CELA biliteracy test, native speakers at home and how you can show that on your application. If there's any follow-up questions, you can go to our website on languagebird.com. You could submit a form. One of our admissions counselors would reach out and be happy to answer any questions that you have. So we're open to just being a language solution provider to anybody with questions as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everyone who's listening, either live or on the recording, you can, if you want to be connected with LanguageBird, you can reach out to us. You can also find them online and on Instagram. And we're just so thankful to have you here. And we definitely love having your company as an option for our students. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And if any ESM kids have questions for us that you want me to answer, you can reach out to me as well.
Absolutely. I will. Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to future conversations.
Me too. Thank you so much, Karyn. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.